By June of 1942, 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy appeared unstoppable. Their defense perimeter was rapidly expanding across the Pacific, clearing the seas for potential strikes against Fiji, Samoa, and Hawaii. That momentum hit a psychological hurdle in April. 16 American B-25 bombers launched from an aircraft carrier and dropped their payloads over Tokyo. The Doolittle raid was militarily minor, but it exposed a glaring vulnerability in the airspace above the Japanese home islands. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, formulated a response. He determined that to secure the Pacific, he had to lure out and destroy the remnants of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, specifically the American aircraft carriers that had escaped Pearl Harbor. This map shows the design of his operation. He selected Midway, a tiny atoll at the northwestern edge of the Hawaiian chain, as his bait. He designed a complex approach, dispersing his naval groups over hundreds of miles of open ocean. The heavy battleships would trail far behind Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's carrier strike force, remaining hidden until the American fleet arrived to defend the island. This dispersal was intended to spring a deceptive, lethal trap. In reality, it spread the Japanese forces so thin they could not mutually support each other, leaving Nagumo's carriers stripped of heavy battleship protection. Yamamoto assumed the Americans were blind to his movements. He didn't know that U.S. Navy cryptanalysts at Station Hypo in Hawaii had already broken parts of the Japanese Navy's main operational code, JN-25B. The codebreakers knew an attack was imminent on a location the Japanese called Objective AF. To confirm where AF was, the base at Midway broadcasted an uncoded radio message stating their water purification system was broken. Within 24 hours, Hypo intercepted a Japanese message reporting that AF was short on water. The trap was mapped. The Americans possessed the precise date of the attack, early June, and a complete order of battle detailing the strength and disposition of the approaching Japanese fleet. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Chester Nimitz calculated he had rough parity with the Japanese. He quietly dispatched Task Forces 16 and 17 to wait in ambush northeast of Midway. This included the carrier USS Yorktown, a ship the Japanese believed destroyed a month prior, but had actually undergone round-the-clock repairs at Pearl Harbor. The Imperial Japanese Navy sailed steadily forward under strict radio silence, moving blindly but completely confident they held absolute surprise. Instead, they were moving directly into a counter-ambush, their movements entirely dictated by an enemy weaponizing invisible information. At dawn on June 4th, the Japanese fleet initiated their assault, sending 108 aircraft to bomb Midway's installations. Despite inflicting heavy damage, they failed their primary objective. The American airstrips remained functional, leaving the island's land-based bombers able to refuel and launch. Receiving word from his pilots that Midway required a second strike, Vice Admiral Nagumo made a fateful calculation. He ordered his reserve aircraft, originally held back and armed with anti-ship torpedoes in case the American fleet appeared, to be rearmed with ground attack bombs. Meanwhile, the American carriers had located the Japanese fleet, but launching their strike force of 117 aircraft took over an hour. Rather than waiting to assemble a coordinated formation, the American squadrons were sent toward the target piecemeal, separated by varying aircraft speeds and altitudes. The American torpedo bombers arrived first. Flying low and slow over the water, without any fighter escorts to draw fire, they flew directly into a wall of intense anti-aircraft flak and swarming Japanese Zeros. They suffered near total casualties without scoring a single hit. By mid-morning, the American counter-ambush appeared to be a complete failure. Dozens of aircraft were lost, the Japanese carriers remained entirely unscathed, and Yamamoto's vision of overwhelming naval superiority seemed secure. This diagram shows the unintended tactical consequence of those doomed torpedo runs. By forcing the Japanese combat air patrol fighters to dive down to sea level to intercept them, the American squadrons pulled the defensive screen entirely out of position. The high-altitude sky above the Japanese carriers was left wide open. Down on the decks, the situation was equally precarious. Nagumo's repeated conflicting orders to switch from anti-ship to land attack weapons had created a lethal backlog. hangar decks were jammed with armed strike aircraft, snaking fuel hoses and stacks of unsecured bombs and torpedoes. At that exact moment, 3 American dive bomber squadrons arrived from the high altitudes. They found themselves directly over the Japanese fleet, completely unopposed by enemy fighters. It was 10:25 a.m. The broken codes that brought the Americans here, the logistical backlog on the flight decks, and the uncoordinated timing of the attacks had perfectly converged. The American pilots pushed their noses down into steep dives. Within minutes, precision bomb hits tore through the wooden flight decks of the Akagi, the Kaga, and the Soryu, igniting the massive stockpiles of fuel and unsecured ordnance waiting in the hangars below. In a span of just 5 minutes, devastating secondary explosions consumed 3 of the 4 heavy carriers present. The core striking power of the Japanese Empire was erased. The sole surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, immediately launched a desperate counterstrike. Her aircraft managed to track down the American fleet, scoring hits that crippled the USS Yorktown and forced her crew to abandon ship. But the American forces quickly retaliated, locating the Hiryu later that afternoon. Another wave of dive bombers left the final Japanese fleet carrier a burning derelict, finishing the engagement. Japan lost 3,000 men in the engagement, including highly trained aircraft mechanics, specialized aviation armorers, and veteran Pearl Harbor pilots. These specialists were difficult to replace, and their loss would degrade Japanese carrier operations for the remainder of the war. Fearing the psychological impact of the disaster, the Imperial Japanese High Command enacted a strict cover-up. The public was fed reports of a great victory, and wounded sailors returning to Japan were held in isolated hospital wards, quarantined even from their own families. The truth could be suppressed, but the strategic damage could not be repaired. The loss of institutional knowledge and veteran talent permanently crippled the offensive capabilities of the Imperial Japanese Navy. As we see on the map, Midway abruptly halted Japanese expansion, seizing the strategic initiative for the Allies. It allowed American forces to transition to the offensive, paving the way for the grinding attrition of the Guadalcanal campaign that would begin just months later. The battle established a new reality for naval combat. The carrier and air superiority had rendered the era of the battleship obsolete. From this point forward, aircraft determined who controlled the sea. It also revealed the quiet, decisive power of signals intelligence. Modern wars would increasingly be shaped by cryptanalysts working in windowless basements, determining the battlefield long before a single shot was fired. Midway remains the definitive turning point of the Pacific War, a victory built on invisible information, won in 5 minutes of chaotic courage.